Well, the truth is, we all know it. Those words from Ecclesiastes, one of the Hebrew Bible's wisdom books attributed to Solomon, just sung for us in that familiar setting, remind us of it. Change is the only constant. Easy to say, but not always easy to embrace. Yet in so many ways, we know that the quality of our lives at a personal level, at the level of our community, and at the level of our planet, depend upon us embracing change. Author Jonathan Starr observed, all change can bring one to a higher state, and the essential key to transformation on all levels is to accept change, to witness it, to honor it, to go with it, to see it in the glory of it. At all levels, making change and the acceptance of change, the embrace of change, is critical for us to flourish, sometimes for us just to survive. At a theological level, historically, Unitarians and Universalists have really been pretty good at embracing change. In our beliefs, we collectively and individually have been open to change. From the time Unitarians heretically preached that our fate was not predetermined from the beginning of time, to the time when Universalists heretically preached that a loving God damned no one to hell, to a time when our tradition broadened to embrace humanism and the teachings of Eastern religions and earth-centered traditions as well. All are pretty bold embraces of change. Oh, those moves were not without controversy. We struggled some, but ultimately we were open to make the change. One of my colleagues, when participating in a panel discussion on theological diversity, was asked to respond to the question, where do Unitarian Universalists stand on this or that particular theological issue? And he answered, we don't stand, we move. To paraphrase one of our hymns, we do honor the ideas from our past, but we trust the dawning future more. At a more practical level, Unitarian Universalists, along with many other faith traditions, have drawn from their teachings, from their beliefs, a mandate for change, a calling to change the world, to make it more just. From women's suffrage and civil rights to LGBTQ equality and saving the planet, we get excited about change. We fight for changes that improve the lives of people and make for a more equal and just world. We love the slogan that's often attributed to Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. And I believe, however imperfectly, most of us try to live by those words. Okay, but let's not pat ourselves on the back too much just yet. We all have some discomfort with change too, perhaps even distrust of change. Often we deny the need for it and even fear it. Even when there are problems with the way things are, we often want to overlook them to stay with the comfortable. How often have you heard or perhaps said yourself, when someone offers a new idea, the way we've done it in the past has always worked, and it will in the future? Change can challenge us in ways we may not want to be challenged. How we participate in and react to change in our lives, in our families, in our jobs, in our community, in our fellowship, and in our world, I think is something that we all need to examine. So first, on the personal level, sometimes we welcome it, like when a new child comes into your family or when you find a new relationship. But of course, we don't welcome some other changes in our lives, like when we lose a loved one, when we get a troubling medical diagnosis, or even the changes that just come with advancing years. These can be such difficult and painful changes in our lives, and we can try to deny these changes. We can be angry, or we can find ways to embrace what the changes of passing time have brought. making peace with that sage advice from the book of Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season, and the wheel of life continues to turn, is often not easy. Sometimes we think we can just jam the wheel of time and keep the seasons from changing, rather than accept, turn graciously with the change. There are many changes that happen over which we have little or no control, and with respect to those sorts of changes, what we do have control over is how we respond to them. Well, let's go back to that silly story about the cheese. Few of us are like Sniff and Scurry. In the words of Confucius, beasts that feed on grass don't fret over a change in pasture. Creatures that live in the water don't fret over a change of streams. Few of us just adapt with the speed and ease of these creatures. Hem and Haw experienced something very different than the mice did. They certainly did hem and haw, agonizing over change. They experienced that loss is part of change. And in all change, there is some loss. There is something precious that we don't want to let go of, even if it's getting stinky and running out like the cheese. Even if it's something in our life that if we think about it, have really outgrown, something that no longer is meeting our needs, even if it holds us back from recognizing some great new possibility. And there's another lesson, I think, in that silly story, and that is that in all change, there's some risk. To welcome change is to live with some uncertainty, and even to risk that we might be wrong. But in a world of change, staying where you are has just as much risk. We tend to forget that. Doing nothing in response to situations that are calling out to us has real negative consequences over time. Now, if you're like me, even little changes can annoy you. I was cooking at my house last week, and I kept discovering that someone had put several of the things I needed away in different places than where they belonged. Guess what? Someone had literally moved the cheese, and I was annoyed. And I once, remember back, I had a roommate who liked to rearrange the furniture all the time, and that could become kind of annoying too. But today I'm talking about much more than being flexible in things that aren't very important. Instead, I want to focus on those situations in our lives, in our families, in our fellowship, in our troubled and threatened world that are calling out to us to embrace change, to make change. These changes are not trivial and not easy to embrace. Now, probably the hardest change in my life was leaving the practice of law to go to divinity school to become a minister. For several years, I had felt the calling to do so. Now, I loved the law, but I was not really happy with what I was doing. But I was very comfortable. I was afraid of making the change. What if it didn't go right? What if it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to? Like hem and haw, I hemmed and hawed. And finally, I made the leap. And at first, I was excited. But then when I actually started divinity school, I found it was not an easy change at all to go from being a lawyer to being a student. Those first few months, I thought more than once, my God, what have you done? I'll be honest with you. I missed my former identity and even the power and prestige that I had given up. One of the things that got me through this time was the fact that of the 11 of us studying to be Unitarian Universalist ministers at Harvard Divinity School, 5 of us were lawyers who had all had significant practices, and we were all experiencing the same thing. We supported each other in the process. The support of community is very important when we're embracing change. After a while, as I became immersed in my studies, another part of me opened up. I discovered new and better things and saw new opportunities, new possibilities. It was hard to make the change. but an entirely new part of my life opened that I would not ever have known of if I had not embraced the change that was calling to me. Well, then there are other kinds of changes, ones beyond personal decisions, ones that perhaps we participate in and make happen with others collectively. We may be the change agent, or just a quiet supporter, or perhaps one who's reluctantly dragged along. We may perhaps challenge or oppose the change, sometimes with good reason, sometimes just because it's different from what we know, sometimes because it comes from one whom we're not quite sure about. I want to tell you another true story. I had a great aunt, name was Laura, a birthright Unitarian. She lived in a small, charming New England town and attended one of those quintessentially New England meeting houses every Sunday. In her mind, everything in that town should remain exactly as it is. And it pretty much did for many years. Certainly through my childhood it did. And then Digital built a major operations center in the next town. And all kinds of different people were buying property and building new homes in her town. Some of them, God forbid, even modern in design. Well, the town was run by a traditional town meeting form of government. And in fairness to my aunt, she was never unkind to the new people, in some ways perhaps even welcoming. But at one town meeting, when many of the new residents showed up, she greeted them and welcomed them. And then once the meeting was underway, she, exercising her best parliamentary practice skills, raised a point of order. She began by saying to the moderator that it was lovely that these new folks decided to come to the meeting, and then went on to say, but she could not understand why they were being allowed to vote, as they were not born and raised in the town. True story. Well, when I first came to this fellowship, there were 50 or 60 members. We're now well over 250. It's not the same congregation it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Wonderful people have passed away. Others have moved on. And wonderful new people like those who've joined us today have come on board. We are always changing. When an organization grows in numbers, it necessarily changes in other ways too. Some would prefer not to grow so that things stay the same. But if you think about it, that's not really an option, not if we wish to remain true to who we say we are, not if we wish to be true to the principles we stand for. As we say each Sunday, that of welcoming all who seek a spiritual home in this beloved community, regardless of whoever they are. Not if we want to be true to our commitment to diversity. Not if we think the message of our faith tradition and what happens here on Sunday mornings and what we do together during the week could be a gift, perhaps even a life-saving gift, to so many other people. As Haw discovered, but him refused to do, accepting the change, honoring it, and growing with it can take us to a new and better place. And what about poor Haw? The opportunity is there for him to be part of the change, but he's struggling, and he may well miss that opportunity to get his part of the cheese. We're all facing changes. Some of us are struggling with tough changes that are thrust upon us. Many of us are struggling with whether it's time to make some significant change in our lives. And as a fellowship, the possibility and promise of some change is on the table now too. Missed opportunity is the greatest cost of the resistance to change. The new cheese is waiting for us somewhere in the maze, but even when our old cheese is no longer adequate, we worry we won't like the new cheese. Our fear of change, our comfort with the way things have always been, holds us back in places that we have outgrown, in ways that are no longer serving us well, in ways that are limiting us. ways that can even have negative consequences in the long run. Fear of change and comfort with the way things are in our personal lives, in our community, in our fellowship, in our country, and even in our world is holding us back from missed opportunities and significant negative consequences. By example, just think of the climate crisis for the moment and the consequences to our planet, where a failure to change could mean truly the end of human existence. Well, as the hymn we opened with this morning joyfully instructed us, please don't be afraid of some change. I know that you like the old cheese, but try the new cheese. I bet you may just like it. Who knows? Maybe even better. Well, this service wouldn't be complete if we didn't recognize the difficult change that has been thrust upon us by COVID. I think that we've done incredibly well with that challenge, with that change, all those changes. But it's not been easy. When I heard those words sung from Ecclesiastes this morning, as you did, do you know which ones jumped out for me? Maybe for you too. The line that said, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. We have been in the season when it's been the time to refrain from embracing each other, refrain from just being together in person, of seeing each other's smile in person, of touching the other person. And it's been tough. I know that the decision to stop our in-person services and to return to Zoom only has been especially tough for some. It was not an easy decision for our leaders to make. But I believe that it won't be for long, that we will make it through again, and we will again soon be able to gather in person, and maybe even embrace. So now, as I extinguish our chalice, ending our service, may the message of this wonderful old song you'll hear lift your spirits, and boy, when the season is right, hopefully soon, won't it be a wonderful change?